Brian Ashe, state representative for the 2nd Hampden District, which includes East Longmeadow, Hamden, Longmeadow and Monson, is an 11-year incumbent. Allison Werder, a Republican, has stepped up to challenge him. Ashe spoke with me about his positions on tax accountability, education funding, elder affairs, and more.
Well, I've been in office, as you know, for 10 years now, and as we were talking before we went on air, a job like representative or any legislative job, it takes a lot of time to get yourself entrenched into the seat, to build the relationships necessary to be successful, not only in your district, but at the State House. And I feel the last couple terms, I've really felt comfortable in the position, started to get a lot of activity, a lot of things done for my district. And you need people that have experience in the job. We've had a lot of turnover, as you know, in Western Mass, especially, you know, down in...
Kulik, Zybeck, the death of Peter Kokot. Senator Rosenberg.
Right, so that's a big turnover. In Western Mass, we have to fight harder out here anyway. And we work very good as a Western Mass delegation, but there's a lot of newer reps and senators. So we need some people that have some tenure, that know what they're doing, that have built the experience, and they're getting the job done.
But it seems the 2nd Hampden District, which you represent, you had a challenger kind of first term right out of the gate, coming back, looking at a second time in office. And pretty consistently, you've had either a primary challenger.
No primary.
Or, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had one primary challenger.
No.
Okay, my mistake.
I did when the seat was open.
Yeah. Right.
That was it, yeah. So but then since then.
Back then.
Yes.
So primary challenger and, as is the case now with Allison Werder, during the general election. What do you think it is about the 2nd Hampden District that's drawing challengers more consistently than maybe some of the other seats?
I just think that it's a well-educated district. They pay attention to politics very much. And I don't think it's necessarily the seat. I think it's more of a Republican-Democrat thing, that the Republican Party has been trying to get the seat back. They had it for 40 years.
A long time.
Yeah, for 40 years. So I've been in there 10 years, and they've been trying to push candidates to run ever since.
Also, history may be working here in Allison Werder's favor. Female candidates who have a long time held this seat. Well, one of the things that Ms. Werder said to us when she was in here was really her perceived notion that there's a need for more accountability of tax dollars at the state level. And so that's something that she's been frustrated with as an outside observer. She's a first-time political candidate. What do you think? Is there a need for more accountability when it comes to the way tax dollars are spent?
I don't know about more accountability. I think we've done a pretty good job over the past 10 years to build up transparency in government as much as we can with reform in all different areas of our state government. And I think we've done a pretty good job about the accountability of our tax dollars. And that comes down to the governor working with the House and the Senate. And I think we've done a good job with that now. We've got a Republican governor, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. And I think right now we've got a pretty good situation that most people feel like they can work with the governor and vice versa.
Even though he is a Republican,
well,
right?
Exactly.
And it's a majority Democratic legislature here in Massachusetts. But the fact remains that there aren't consistent roll call votes among elected representatives, and that's a way for the average person to look and say, hey, my representative voted so-and-so way on this issue. Allison Werder's not alone in calling for the need for a roll call vote. Do you see a need?
A roll call vote for what?
So that when you're taking a vote in the legislature, you are being counted individually as, but not every time. A roll call vote needs to be called for.
They can be called for every single time. There's informal votes, and then there's formal votes. So if nobody calls for a roll call, it's informal. Those are usually,
but that's the point. So she's saying every vote that she thinks is cast should be a roll call vote.
You'd be in there forever. We'd be in there for days at a time. The roll call votes are always for the more serious votes, the things that people are paying attention to. It's usually the more procedural votes, or there's something very minor that the majority of people are going to vote for. It's not any vote that there would be a discrepancy, that there would be people on both sides. It would be a roll call vote.
So you disagree there, no worries.
100%.
So paid family leave is something that the legislature got done this most recent session. A new tax is the result of how that will be paid for. Do you think that that was the right way to fund this particular initiative?
Well, I hate to see any new taxes. I mean, I've been against raising any of our taxes, but so that's how we pay for most of our services in the Commonwealth and in the country, you know, whether it's roads, whether it's our, police, everything is paid for by our taxes. I'd like to see us get more creative with that, but that was something that was very important to the voters.
education funding this time around, the legislature did try to have some changes to the way that formula is doled out. And one of the concerns that I've heard raised here in Western Massachusetts is about the need for more funding dollars here, whether that's for paying for transportation or more recently looking at something that's called the achievement gap, where, you know, a lot of times Massachusetts is ranked #1, whether that's SAT scores or things like that. But when you look hyper-local, closer to home for your district, big disparities there. And a lot of people are calling for more funding for these districts who need help catching up. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, and that kind of goes back to the charter school debate as well. You know, we have to invest in our public school system. We have to make sure that our public school system is healthy, and that's not just, I'm lucky in my district, we have great schools. But we have to make sure that the city of Springfield, city of Holyoke, Chicopee, all the surrounding areas have what they need to not only get the right teachers in there, to make sure that they have the proper tools to be able to teach these kids.
But do you think you'll be able to convince legislators in the eastern part of the state that, okay, here's the education pool of funding, but X amount more needs to come out west?
Well, that goes back to tenure in office. The longer you're in, if you're building relationships with your colleagues in the eastern part of the state, that's how you get things done. That's how you go to your colleagues that are Boston or the South Shore or the North Shore and say, hey, this is really important to us out in Western Mass. We'd appreciate your vote. And if you've got good relationships built, that's how you get things done, negotiating.
Elder Affairs, I know that that's a committee that you sit on, and it's an issue that you've advocated on behalf of elder citizens, more protections for them. Recently, when we've been hearing about scams perpetrated against elders, does the state need to get more involved and outline more harsher penalties for people who are targeting the elderly?
Absolutely, and that's something we've talked about in our committee, what we can do to make sure that anybody who tries to take advantage of our elderly should be held accountable. And if it's a jailable offense or something that, you know, a more harsh sentence, absolutely, 100% we're behind that. It's not just Massachusetts saying, listen, we want to do this and penalize people who are doing it. You have to have the FBI involved. You have to have all the public safety involved to make sure that you can capture these people, you can find where they're coming from.
Something else that you and a few other legislators in the region have talked about is this concept of the failing concrete that we're seeing now in some of the foundations, whether it be in Monson. Obviously, we know it initially believed to be originated in Connecticut.
Right.
But one of the things you told Mass Live and the Republican is that you hope that legislators will find a solution that will, quote, make people whole again.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it's difficult to explain the whole thing of the Crumbling Foundation, but the Crumbling Foundation it started in Connecticut. There was a company, a quarry that had
basically faulty concrete
something in the
these
concrete that
foundations.
if it gets damp years later can fall apart. We're finding these things out. People have had foundations 15, 20, 25 years. I think it was back in the 80s when it was more prevalent, up until about 2000.
When this specific type of concrete
Exactly.
was used in the
So
building.
there's people mostly in Connecticut, but a vein of it up in through Western Mass. So people are stuck with having to raise their entire home if it's their foundation and pulling out the foundation a couple $100,000. So we've met with Congressman Nia, we've met with the IRS. We're trying to work out every possible scenario, what we can do so these people aren't stuck with this huge burden, because what's going to happen, they'll just say, I can't pay for it. The banks are stuck with the house. So we're dealing with the banks, with real estate companies, everybody trying to get them all on the same table so we can try to make people whole again, which means that they're not so burdened that they can't afford to live in their own house.